Hi everyone, my name is Sammy, and this is my video info brief on currently and formerly incarcerated women and what it means to work with them as library and information science professionals. So I want to start with the background. Um, Trauma begets trauma. And I think particularly when we're looking at incarcerated women in the United States, we have several factors to consider. One of those factors is that, unlike other diverse populations, incarceration is not an identity characteristic. Now, some may use it as a weapon against another's identity, but it's not the same as having a queer identity or occupying a space in a certain ethnic group. Incarceration is not inborn and it is not sought out. So how do women end up incarcerated? Well, according to several different authors, we know that um, the most common trait that they share is that they were victims of sexual assault before incarceration. According to Braithwaite and his co-authors, many incarcerated women are also victimized again um, within the carceral system, um, which is deeply disturbing, although I think to many of us in this course, coming from a trauma informed perspective, it's not that surprising. So, state sanctioned violence is, of course, harsher against women than it is against men. Um, and several authors explain that women who are incarcerated are typically serving longer sentences for the same crimes as men. Um, and then while they are serving their time, they are disciplined more harshly than men would be in their penitentiaries because women don't get away with as much. The types of trauma that these women are susceptible to, because they're all individuals, it's anything you can think of, but it is more likely for incarcerated women to have experienced very severe trauma, um, which can lead to self medicating behaviors. Um, and as we know, um, most self medicating um, items like drugs are illegal, and the way that you might go about getting money to purchase those um, items is also sometimes illegal. So this can lead to women um, going to extreme measures to try to keep themselves and their families together, and then ending up incarcerated. The future outcomes for these women are pretty bleak. So, about 5 to 10% of women enter prison or jail um, pregnant, which is uh, not easy to face given the amount of uh, gynecological neglect in the carceral system in the United States, because the carceral system was built for men. And the people who built it decided that you could just replace the word men with women anywhere it was written, and that you would be good to go. So the medical neglect that women face is detrimental not only to their health, but to their community's health when they are released. And the social outcomes are worse. So incarceration in and of itself can be seen as a trauma. You're being cut off from everyone you love physically, and then um, because women are not incarcerated at the same rates as men, their prisons or jails are a little bit um, farther apart geographically, which makes it difficult to stay in touch with um, people on the outside. So, what are our roles as librarians? What can libraries do to offer better service? So, here are the things that I learned in my research and what we can do. So I learned that incarcerated women really want to be free of the panopticon. They don't want to be watched every second of every day. Um, so it's not just about being free from the cell, but free from watchful eyes, which includes the prison librarian um, and the librarian at the public library. We need to consider that we have a level of power over people, and we need to um, tread lightly. I learned that libraries and jails and prisons are often run by volunteers. This is something that's hopeful to me, right? Because if you are an LIS professional, you are going to want to run a prison library the way that you want. Um, but if you are a volunteer, you typically have to answer to someone who is supervising on the outside, um, which gives libraries a chance to train up volunteers um, with the ethics of the American Library Association and understanding um, how to care for people with a trauma informed approach. And I also learned that the ALA does not support censorship, especially for incarcerated people. Um, they do concede that censorship is sometimes required by law if it is material that instructs, incites, or advocates criminal action or bodily harm. Um, and that is from the Prisoner's Right to Read, an interpretation of the Library Bill of Rights. Um, and I'm, you know, how do we decide who gets to read what? So we'll come back to that. So here are ways that the library and the individual practitioner can be supportive. For formerly incarcerated women, I think providing a workshop about community organizing or grassroots organizing would be great. So, in one of the articles I read, women really enjoyed working together to help incarcerated women after they are released. So I think that, instead of teaching a business class one night, the library could host an organizing class. This teaches a broad range of skills to anyone. So they don't necessarily have to disclose their statuses as formerly incarcerated women. And it can provide some fulfillment in their lives. And we also need to make room in our collections for materials that maybe we haven't thought about. So in the Sweeney article, one of the women that she speaks with really identifies with characters in novels that you or I might not be even remotely close to, but she understands her own personhood through these characters in a way that she never has before, and it's really moving to her to learn that she's not alone. So as the practitioner, remember that we are more creative than the correctional officer. We can exemplify in our justifications for reading materials for imprisoned peoples that, here's the reason why it is important for them to have access to this book. Because they requested it is not usually a good enough reason for the law. But, we have a code of ethics to follow, and that requires that we provide equitable access to people. And then the other thing is that it's really important that everything that we have learned about punishment and revenge, basically, and racism and misogyny, we have to unlearn that. We need to read on our own time and educate ourselves on our own time, or maybe the library could step in and have professional development depending on what kind of community you're working in. But we need to be able to, unlearn stigma towards incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people, or at least be able to manage our facial expressions. because it's not fair to pile on microaggressions to people who've already experienced trauma before and during incarceration. And, consider how you would feel if you were victim to addiction and you made a choice that was illegal, but you made a choice based on your addictive disease that led you to incarceration, and then you were severed from your family, and you were humiliated under the watchful eyes of the law, and you had to, be told what you could and could not read, and what you could and could not wear, and where you could and could not go. And I think that, you know, just understanding what that would feel like is enough to generate a lot of empathy. Um, and then there are some future research options I listed here. But I really think that what needs to happen is lobbying for very different conditions for incarcerated people. So, you know, some of the articles I've read that gave me insight on how women in U.S. prisons um, interact with prison libraries and their workers were kind of pieced together from women who are considered, you know, maybe perhaps high achievers in the prison system who go to classes of their own volition, or some of the articles were about men, or some of the articles were focused on penitentiaries in other countries. So I would like to know about specifically women in U.S. prisons, the general population of women. Um, and, is the public library a convenient place for formerly incarcerated women to seek help finding social services? But then that raises the question of, does it matter? In some places, if you have a felony charge on your record, you can't receive food stamps. You can't vote. You can't seek a higher education. So how can you keep your family together? So what I'm saying is, we all have our part to play in this, but at the end of the day, as a society, we've got some really big fish to fry. And I will leave you with this. In 2006, the Supreme Court heard Beard versus Banks, which was a case about whether or not it was legal for a Pennsylvania penitentiary to deny any secular reading material to the men they deemed the most incorrigible. The Supreme Court upheld that it was indeed legal to deny secular reading material to grown men who were deemed incorrigible. We never know where we're going to be in our lives. And I think that what I learned most through this research is that we have a lot more in common with each other than we have different about us. And as LIS professionals, we ought to reach out to incarcerated women and formerly incarcerated women with openness and gentleness. Here are my references. Thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, please just leave a comment.